Well, I don't even know how to report this particular one and when I'm going to be posting it. An incident happened in Rosamond, a shooting that happened, someone's misery, an accident. What? A gentleman named of Billy, who is town. Well, how would you classify a gentleman with mental health illness? Had been suffering it through for about a few decades of his life. Loses his family along the way, and the only person who would ever care to try to take care of him would be his sister. But even she had a problem taking care of him because sometimes he just liked where he was, which was out in the desert of Rosamond, right between 25th and Rosamond Boulevard, where the Chevron station and Alberson reside in. A desert region where he made it home for himself. One time he had a dog, and this dog would be with him all the time, and people would give him food, money to get food for the dog, supply him with dog food sometimes. They would also supply Billy with food and sometimes clothing, medical needs. He was mentally off, but he was considered harmless according to a lot of residents who knew him, who have known of him and knew Billy directly. Even a law enforcement out here who experienced Billy several times had, well, they didn't thought him as a threat to anybody. Maybe a bit of a nuisance, but they really didn't have any hard feelings about the guy because he was suffering through a lot of mental health. And the thing is, because of our mental health system we have right now, over the decades, over political decisions have happened throughout our state's history. We had lost the ability to take care of and house and hospitalize whenever possible the mental health, or even have facilities to do so. Nope, because of a governor who decided he was going to cut taxes left and right, cut off funding and any kind of services that might happen. Now we're paying the price decades later. Thank you, Ronald Reagan. And at this point, anybody who's regarded nervous and mental would have to go to outpatient clinics for assistance. They would get evaluated first. If they got picked up by law enforcement, picked up as a 5150, taken for a 3-day hold in a psych ward at a local hospital if they actually had such a thing, and then decided whether or not they're too dangerous to be on the street or danger to themselves, or maybe not so much. If they are not so much, they're released back into the wild, but told to go for outpatient services and medications and stuff. Some actually do, others haven't, and pay the price for it. Billy was one of those who paid the price with his life eventually. An incident happened last night at the Jack in the Box area. Apparently, there was a yelling match between the. How would one classify a gentleman with mental health illness? Do we consider him a nut job? Other people outside our county, actually outside our city here, our town, our community of Rosamond, would consider him eccentric but mentally challenged, or nuts, or just plain out crazy. We got a few shares walking around up and down the town. And here's one of our long lasting ones. Apparently, the incident happened where he set fire to the desert right by Jack in the Box. CHP was arriving from the help needed request from 9/11. They tried to put out the fire, but one of the officers confronted Billy. Apparently, the officer, was unfamiliar with Billy and how to take care of him, or how to talk him down. Not much is known from the official side because nothing's been written up or even posted just yet, but more research is needed for this one. A little bit of a news service, if you can call it, videotapes just strung together and then was showing that the aftermath was happening at Jack in the Box with all the crime tape in the area. Kind of shut them down for the night. And then investigators are still combing the area. Takes out part of their business anyway for Chevron and Jack in the Box. What happened from different sources pieced together and from conversations from I and Rosamond, two groups sharing the same name, and from a few outside witnesses, the town folk who actually saw it, who was reporting it online. The officer fired at Billy. They called him a large white male. Well, he was a large white male. And he was probably in his 40s. And it was said that this gentleman was also a vet. We don't know until his next of kin's been notified, and then maybe the rest of the town will be finding out sooner or later. But he had been shot, taken over to the Antelope Valley Hospital, and pronounced dead, according to the social media postings that they keep plastering all over I and Rosamond. And maybe just a few of them on this one stringer group of the AV population who is calling himself AV Stringer News. It's got the residents who knew Billy up and down the area up in arms. The ones who've been frequenting the area where Albertsons and shopping center and the gas stations and restaurants. Those have had constant contact with him, and their comings and goings are expressing their deep concerns. Some of them wondered why the cops did what they did. Why didn't the officers use less than lethal force? And it's a good question. But Billy presented a knife. And according to training, they see a knife. The law enforcement happens to see a knife. They treat it by using lethal force. Unfortunately, they're still doing that in different parts of our country, even for the ones who are suffering. Was Billy deciding at that time to end it all? Did he actually make a conscious decision at that time to say, I'm going to end it all by going crazy and having the cops kill me because my existence is so damn miserable? A lot of people can't understand the mental health on how they're acting or acting out on some occasions unless they've been there and done that. Unless they've already had so much pain and misery in their life that there's no way out but death. Was this suicide by cop? Did he actually plan this, or did it just actually happen as a happenstance? It just happened, and that's it. It has to be put down in a report. It just happened. No reason given for the gentleman to go belligerent. There was a reason. Only us sane people don't understand it. Only the sane people don't know just how much he probably had to endure. Part of his brain was shut down already, just functioning. I met him a few times. I've encountered him a few times. And he is, or actually was, aware of what was going on around him. It just didn't communicate that effectively to people. But some people actually did find a way to communicate with him. Was this the right way to treat or deal with him? There's been differences of opinion on this one. A taser could have been used. A taser could have been used to shock him into unconsciousness, take him to the hospital, put him under a 72-hour psych hold while the hospital administration works to find out if Billy was actually a revolving patient of sorts, and if they could have contacted his sister, and they would keep him for a short time and then probably release him afterwards. But they would have to take him back to where he came from. You just can't put a guy like him on a bus. Knowing how Billy was mentally, there was no way you could have actually put him on a bus and expect him to be functional. There are people out there who suffer through mental health or mental illness, as we call it. Some of us actually do have higher brain access. Sorry, that was something of a computer glitch on my part. I apologize for that. For some of us who actually have higher brain function at this point over here, and who are suffering through our own disease in our own way, we can try functioning by getting transportation in which way we can. But in regarding to Billy's situation, what they would do is transport him back over to where they found him, which was in the scene of the area where he already caused a problem in the first place. And it's been done so many times by Kern County all the time. I'm not quite sure about LA County. I'm not quite sure about CHP, but I do know Kern County did the same thing. They simply did not have the facilities necessary to take care of the mental health. They didn't. If you are mentally unstable, judged to be so, ruled to be so, you're stuck with this stigma. You're given whatever kind of course of treatment that the medical establishment prescribes for you, either by medication or by groups or by something else, and treated as outpatient. But in Kern County, they simply do not have the inpatient facilities necessary to take care of the mentally ill. And Billy was one of those. We've had a few people who are so strung out that they were bipolar and schizophrenic at the same time. At one time at this apartment complex, we've actually had someone like that. Their family tried to take care of him, but they couldn't. Law enforcement wouldn't touch him, except one threat of violence was recorded. In this situation, it was, and the person was ejected off the premises, no longer living. And we've never seen the person since for a few years already. In Billy's case, he had been moved from place to place, but still living in the same area. He had a tent shack, if you can call it that, along wire fence in the desert, a small desert patch, right in the vicinity of the gas station. Bit of a turnoff area that they have. It's like a flood zone, a flood control zone. If there was any flooding happening in Rosamond, the base is supposed to be catching it, and he was in that area. A lot of garbage, but a lot of things that he would use. People would still feed him one way or another when Billy was still alive. Yeah, it does disturb me concerning about how the situation happened. I hadn't had prolonged exposure to Billy. I haven't hung around the area to really understand him. Except I know that he was traumatized somewhere in his life. If indeed he was a war veteran, then the PTSD was in full force. No medications to control it. He was just at the mercy of everything. And I suppose his synapses were breaking down left and right. Maybe he was looking for a way out. Maybe he was. But living day to day in his condition, there had been people online going back and forth arguing about his condition. A lot of them are shaken and affected by it, not by his demeanor or by his clothing, not exactly, but how he lived and how they think he chose to live. And other people who claim that they know him have stated that Billy probably felt home because it was the only area he was comfortable in and recognized, and people recognized him. It was where he got food. It was where he got clothing. Now, maybe some people actually helped him out with his laundry or something, I don't know. Or a few other things. Did he actually use Jack in the Box for his, or Chevron Jack in the Box area for his sanitary reasons? I don't know. But he did touch a lot of people's hearts. Whether or not he chose his area or not is irrelevant. He was already home, and people had to accept that. Other people just look at the homeless people and think, okay, that's it. Just toss them out. Sometimes they feel like they've got no other place but where they're living and make it home for themselves. It's not that easy being homeless out there, with or without mental health issues. Regardless if you're an addict or an alcoholic, regardless if you've got PTSD or not. Living out in the streets is not the easiest damn thing, and trust me, it's humiliating, it's embarrassing, it's denigrating, and it wears out everything inside of you. And to be in that position there where every handout is welcomed, and you have to be grateful for it, because if we're talking about food, might not be able to get any more. if it's assistance, you have to be grateful for everything that you get. And I know it's easy enough to feel greedy enough to want more assistance. And it's hard enough to deal with limited resources to keep you alive and functioning for a time. And you have to stretch them out whatever you can. To get food stamps is humiliating, the paperwork involved, and talking with people concerning it. Prior to before COVID kicked, going over to places where they actually had food stamps and cash aid, if you're lucky, was the hardest damn thing ever to deal with. And they would also ask you whether or not if you needed any medical or psych services, knowing that they're in the area. But here's the thing, even if you actually was going through a county insurance for psych, mainly if you were, well, they used to call the program ORSA, but now it's LA Care, repackaged, but still the same thing. Less than an income level or almost no income level, you and are a resident of the county, you would qualify for the county's medical assistance of free medical up to certain types of services, even limited inpatient and outpatient, and medications. Of course, they would limit in this course of treatment because of cost cutting, but that's the program you're entering into. I know I'm supposed to be doing an ode for Billy here, but I'm just trying to explain that I understand a little bit more about Billy than I did a long time ago. Upon coming into this county here, I didn't know I was suffering through nervous and mental and going through breakdowns. I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't realize that my physical body was also going through deterioration in certain portions of it. I didn't realize I was going to be going through a hell of a lot more tragedy than I thought I would be able to handle. And during my lucidity, I'm seeing the people as they are for the first time. And seeing Billy for the first time. It's like seeing some of the people living out in Lancaster or Palmdale. Mostly in Lancaster because that's where the supplies are. For food, shelter, medical. They've had some medical out in Palmdale. Maybe a few churches that'll do the food, but not the shelter. Most of that is out in Lancaster. And they're also having a hard time trying to keep their facilities going because more of the need is increasing on them. How could Billy ever survive? But he did. Didn't want the county handout, even though the county would have given him a food voucher that would have given him food stamps to get food out of the grocery stores. He would have been able to shop for himself. The problem is, he wasn't lucid enough to do so. In a few stores, he would sit down and rest. Maybe some of the people are feeling anxious and sorry for him that they would try to give him some food as well. If the food wasn't earmarked for somebody else or going to be tossed, they would give it to him. If it wasn't spoiled, that is. But just out of kindness for strangers. There have been a few people online and out in the streets would curse and cuss. I'd hear it on some occasions. I'd hear it from some people left and right of it. And it hurts because they haven't been through what he has. They haven't been through his mental agony, whatever the hell he was going through. And because of his inability to spark the connections in his brain to talk to people, to let them know that he was going through a lot of stuff in his life that he can't just deal with. Some people have actually had considered opening their doors for him. There had been rumors around that some people wanted to take him in and take care of him. But he wasn't the kind of type that to do that in the first place. For what I've been reading throughout the years on the social media posts, he was a very hard person to take care of. He was a very hard person to get to know. He kept his distance sometimes, but when he needed help, it wasn't easy for him to ask for it. But he wasn't going to say no to a free sandwich or something. He wasn't going to say no to that. It was food for him. He depended upon literally the kindness of strangers. He depended upon the charity of others. He depended upon the town to take care of him. But on some occasions, he indulged upon the town to put up with his antics. They did for a time. Consider him like Otis of Mayberry, RFD, or the Andy Griffith Show. Otis, when he was drunk, he was drunk and he practically lived in a jail cell. Almost had a jail cell for his own name. Colorful character in town of Mayberry. Well, Billy was the same way in Rosamond, California. A lot of people are going to miss this guy. I don't know if they've actually caught a picture of him and actually posted it there. I would like to know so if they actually did. But I'm not quite sure how he dealt with the cameras. It's kind of hard to talk about a guy like this. A guy who's probably been through much, and if he's a vet, and I suspected he was, and coming back home to a new situation and not able to deal with it since the war was still haunting him. He still wasn't past the transition phase of it. He still had to deal with everything. And that's what was driving him nuts. This hurt him a great deal. He could try getting help. Well, the problem is they couldn't help him out and keep him there long enough. Either bureaucracy would send him back or he would choose to leave. The hardest thing to see is an episode like that and how enduring he is. People have forgotten that we still have a lot more of him out there on the streets, even in our town, small as it is, small looking as it is, but we have a population out there, even beyond our own town borders, that still need the help from others to helped him get taken care of somehow. When one is traveling through Lancaster, through some of the populated areas, one sees this right by the food giveaway places. There's a place called Grace Resources, I think, on close to I and Sierra. It's kind of hard for people to see homeless people coming into that place, not to mention other people who are low in income, scrambling for food, or even wandering in the area. Or how about just along Sierra and Lancaster Boulevard, where county areas are havens for the homeless people to hang out. Different places along the railroads tracks in the surrounding area have communities, tent communities. Presumably some of them are functional, a few maybe not. And if you really were functional, you'd be hanging around the county buildings just to keep up with the damn paperwork or whatever kind of programs they had going. But for the most part, they're wandering the streets, the back alleys, the small side streets. We even have one person out here who is barely functioning, but he's aware of what's going on. He just chooses not to deal with people around here. And he's been here a lot longer than I have. At least he understands how to avoid people at all costs. He's into his own little world, but he's taken care of by a caregiver. So he's lucky. There have been some other instances of other people out of their minds. Have not been. Said before, I had a channel said one time diary of a mentally challenged me. Only because I've had so much on my plate throughout my lifetime, and it gotten even worse during the last 4 or 5 years. That it's been increasingly a pressure. Not to the point where I'm going to be going out there and pitching up a tent. I'm still functional right now as it is, but I've got enough that keeps me from doing the things I want to do and living a life that I want to choose. Unfortunately for Billy, he chose the way he had. And I'm probably going to miss the dude. I didn't have that much in common with him, except we both chewed the same mental. We were both dealing with our own hang-ups. I'm still functional. Billy never had a chance. He never had a chance.